Greetings. I'm Dr. Lisa Warren, President of the International Association of Official Human Rights Agencies, and I'm excited to be here with all of you today as we celebrate International Human Rights Day and the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As you know, the official observance is annually held on December 10th around the world, and we can all take pride in knowing that we at IAOHRA are moving the needle towards a human rights framework. IAOHRA was founded in 1949, and our member organizations include statutory government agencies charged with enforcing federal, state, and local discrimination laws for over 250 million people. Next slide. We need to go back one more. There you go, thank you. In 1948, just 1 year before IAOHRA was established, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that identified 30 articles to protect people from discrimination. And according to the United Nations, human rights are inherent to all human beings, regardless of race or sex, nationality, religion, ancestry, or any other status. Everyone is entitled to basic human rights without discrimination. We all know that today is December 7th, and sadly, a sad day in our history, where Pearl Harbor happened on December 7th, and it led to the relocation of over 100,000 Japanese Americans to prison camps during World War II, based solely on their ancestry. There's no place for this type of injustice in our world. And now most states and municipalities have adopted constitutions and laws that formally protect human rights. And those are the very statutes that our member agencies at IAOHRA enforce every single day. Next slide. Well, don't stay right there. There we go. Stay where you are. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Let's go back to where we were. One more slide. Thank you. Was a landmark document, right? It introduced 30 articles that are fundamental to the protection of human rights globally. Article 1 began by affirming that we are all born free and equal, and that every human being has value. Equality is a universal goal that provides the legal foundation to make equality a reality. Article 2 states that all people are entitled to live free from discrimination. And so the UN's also stressed that governments should take deliberate measures to end discriminatory practices by enforcing human rights laws. And there are 28 other articles that provide a global roadmap for all people, including newcomers and refugees and marginalized communities. So now we are in for a treat because we are about to hear more about this from our very special guest speaker. Next slide. Our guest speaker is Arrey Obenson, a world-class facilitator who has inspired audiences around the globe. Arrey Obenson is the president and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. He actively engages actors from all sectors of society, from businesses to governments and civil society, to identify opportunities and develop strategies to achieve growth. Mr. Obenson previously served as the Secretary General to JCI, a global network of 150,000 young active citizens in more than 100 countries. He also led the organization for 17 years as the Director for Africa and the Middle East. He is a visionary leader, a world-class facilitator, and has inspired and engaged audiences of 50 to 5,000 in nearly 100 countries. Mr. Obenson is a barrister at law and a member of the Cameroon Bar Association, and holds a master's in law degree from Washington University here in St. Louis. He is also the author of Bridging the Opportunity Gap, which was just published in 2021. Help me welcome Arrey Obenson. Arrey, take it away. I think you're muted. We got to unmute you there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Warren, for giving me the opportunity to be part of the conversation around International Human Rights Day. I am a lawyer by background, and when I did my my master's in law, it was really focused on international law and human rights. So I have a special connection to this subject matter. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with reference to the presentations that I'm going to be doing here today. Like you said, I want to just start by saying I'm in St. Louis. I am the CEO and president of the International Institute of St. Louis, which you mentioned. I'm going to talk briefly a little bit about the International Institute and connect our work to human rights. But I wanted to start a little bit about my person, and particularly about the book that I wrote and how it's going to be connected to what we're going to be talking about. And the book is called Bridging the Opportunity Gap. And this book really catalogs my experiences that I've had in the last 20 years traveling to over 106 countries around the world and engaging with people and seeing how we as the human race get to addressing or solving our problems, how we move forward as a society. And the book is really based on the premise that individuals, organizations, and businesses that focus on their challenges are defined by their challenges, while those that focus on their opportunities become defined by their opportunities. The fact that we're talking about moving the needle on human rights today, the fact that there exists a charter on human rights is focusing on opportunities. But too often, our conversations are about the challenges that we fail to envision what the opportunities are and how we can embrace them. Opportunities lie ahead, right? The challenges is the status quo. And how do we move the world from the challenges that we face to the opportunities that we could have? That there is so much profound opportunities in embracing human rights for everyone. Imagine what the world will look like if we created those opportunities in the 30 articles of the Human Rights Declaration. So that's really one of the core philosophies and how I think. I've been president and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis since the 1st of February 2021. And I walked into an organization that is 103 years old with enormous history. The International Institute was started as far back as 1919. And it's relevant to the subject that we're talking about because 1919 was just after the end of the First World War and also the end of another pandemic, which we had in 1918 in the world. And what had transpired here in the United States is that a lot of people fleeing the war and fleeing persecution from Europe had come into the St. Louis area. We had lost a lot of men in the war who had gone to war and not come back. And so all of these women who had come in couldn't speak English, but we needed to integrate them in society. So the International Institute basically started by providing English for women so that they could integrate society and integrate the workforce, creating opportunities for women. But if you tie this to what we're going to be talking about, it's about recognizing the dignity in these women, in these human beings that have moved into the St. Louis area and creating opportunities for them to be recognized in the society as human beings. And subsequently, the organization saw that beyond just providing English language, you had to look at people holistically and look at other areas of development that you could support immigrants moving into the St. Louis area. And subsequently also realized that we have to prepare society to be able to integrate our new arrivals. And that's where the movement towards broadening our services to include understanding multiculturalism and people who come into our society expanded the work of the Institute. And so over the years, we started the Festival of Nations as far back as 1934 to give people an opportunity to understand the various cultures that were moving into the area. Over the years, we've served people who have come after the First World War. We saw a significant increase after the Second World War of Japanese that came into the area. We're providing English language classes and citizenship classes. But we've seen the Koreans come after the Korean War, the Vietnamese come after the Vietnamese War. We've seen different ethnicities move into the area, and the International Institute has played a role in welcoming them into the community. And even more recently, the Bosnians in the 90s, then we saw the Syrians around 2015 and 2016. And in the last year, since I started out, we had a huge influx of Afghans as a result of the collapse of the government in Kabul in Afghanistan. And now we're dealing with the influx of Ukrainians as a result of the war in Ukraine. So that's, in essence, is the historical background of the International Institute. We currently have as our mission and vision to provide opportunities for immigrants and refugees to thrive in order to create a welcoming, prosperous, and healthy region for all. How is all of this relevant to the conversation that we're having today? 74 years ago, 1948, after the end of the Second World War, world leaders came together and said, never again should human beings be exposed to the kind of indignity that we saw during the wars. And one of the things that happened during the war was movement of people, refugees. We saw a significant increase in the number of people that were fleeing conflict. And it is enshrined in the Declaration of Human Rights in Article 14 that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy asylum in other countries fleeing persecution. This is really the role that we play. So our work as a not-for-profit organization founded here in St. Louis, our work is inspired by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because asylum only came into effect in 1951. We are a resettlement agency and we receive refugees, as I mentioned, refugees coming from Afghanistan, from Ukraine. We received the Bosnians, and it is our responsibility. The United States, as a signatory of the 1951 Convention Against Torture, which enshrines the right to asylum for people fleeing persecution in this country. And since 1979, we have been resettling refugees here in St. Louis. These people, the refugees, are human beings like every one of us. They have the same wants that every human being wants. They want safety for themselves and their families. They want to work and earn a living like everyone else. They have the same needs, the need to safety, to shelter, to a roof over their head. But they also have the same fears like every one of us. We fear what we do not know, right? We fear the unknown. But my experience with every refugee has been that they flee their country with the hope of going back someday. They know that tomorrow this war is going to end and they're going to go back. But we end up seeing refugees spending decades, 18, 20 years in refugee camps until they wake up to the realization one day that there's no place for them to go back to call home. Currently in the world today, we have the highest number of refugees ever, bigger than several countries in the world. We have 100 million people who are currently living as refugees around the world. which is the highest the world has ever seen. And one would have thought that we've made a lot of progress as a civilization. So for those people, they need a place to find hope again. They need a place to find safety. They need a place where they can find refuge, a place they can call home with their families. And so organizations like the International Institute, in collaboration with the federal government, because the United States, alongside 12 other countries, have entered into this agreement to provide refuge for refugees. And the president of the United States each year makes a determination to accept a certain number of refugees. And those refugees come into the United States and are distributed among several communities that are happy to welcome them, with St. Louis being one of them, and the International Institute being one agency that works towards welcoming these refugees in St. Louis. So it's a human right to seek and to enjoy asylum in other countries when you're fleeing persecution, and that's one thing that we do. The next thing I also want to highlight with reference to how we do our work is that we do not only think about refuge, but we look at the people who flee persecution, fleeing conflict, who come to this country as human beings. They deserve dignity. So more than just being here when they come, we think about all of the things that we can do for them. We don't see them as, yes, they are not citizens of this country, but that's not what the lenses through which we look at them. We look at them through the lenses of being human beings that deserve that dignity. So our activities, as we develop those activities, are within the context of human dignity, which is the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it says there that everyone is entitled to all the rights without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. And that's the lens that we bring to the work that we do. I want to talk about a little bit about how we've applied that to the people that are coming. And I want to use the case of Afghans that arrived here in 2001. So sometime in August of 2001, without any planning, we saw, or we all watched on television, how Afghans were fleeing the country as a result of the Taliban takeover of the country. And I used this graph to demonstrate how smoothly our year was going with arrivals, right? And you can see that from January of 2021 right up to August, we were getting under 100 arrivals a month. But then there was a spike in October where we essentially received about 500 people within a 3-month period. And it's a huge challenge, because you have to think about when these people move into our communities. And as I'm talking about this, I need for you all to reflect about what's happening now in Poland, what's happening in Moldova, what's happening in Romania, and all those neighboring countries to the crisis in Ukraine. And I can say the same, I know people don't think about this, but I would say the same of what's happening, in the Congo. We've had an ongoing conflict, and you can say what's happening in Rwanda, in Tanzania, in Uganda, as people continue to flee these conflicts. We here in the United States were receiving 570 people within a 3-month period, and it was such a daunting task to welcome them. So imagine what's happening in a country like Moldova, with a population, we've seen its population almost double as a result of the conflict. And how are those people fleeing conflict being treated in those communities? So what we did was try to build a community around these arrivals. And so we mobilized community support. And here's where we can think about the human rights as elusive, as far away from us, as something that belongs to the UN. But in reality, it is something that we implement every day. We may not know the 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but the actions that we take every day are inspired by each one of those articles. And if you read through those articles, you would see how relevant they are to the work that you do in your community, to the work that we do as a society. We just don't make the connection on a daily basis. But we decided that for us to preserve the dignity of the people that were coming, there was no one organization that could provide all the support. So we mobilized the community and we brought the community around. We created a command center that was working 24/7 to ensure that every family that arrived St. Louis had a home. And then we matched them with another family. We gave them a welcoming experience, gave them the dignity of going to the supermarket and getting their own groceries and going back to a home that was furnished. And those are some of the things that we looked at as preserving that human dignity around each one of them. We built the infrastructure to support them because it was important for us to do that and not treat them, not label them as refugees, but see them as human beings. And went out of our way to develop a specific program that will facilitate their integration into society. You know, people who come from outside the United States don't come here with a rental history. They don't come, you can have a background check with them on them, and they don't have a job. And so it's difficult for them to find housing. So we created essentially a housing fund that was providing a guarantee to our landlords that we know these people, they're going to stay, we will pay their rent for a period of time, but that by the time they get to the 4th month, they will be able to pay. And that opens some doors. We're now currently working, because the Afghans are entrepreneurial in nature. We're trying to help them start up businesses, bring their business ideas to the table, and an Afghan Chamber of Commerce is being created to support that. We started a community center here so they feel like this is home, a place where they can get together and engage with one another. An Afghan newspaper as well so that they don't miss information. One of the things that we noticed during COVID was that a lot of information was being lost in translation because when you make public announcements, especially at a crucial time, you want to make sure that everybody gets the information at the same time. So that was something that we're working on. So these are all access to technology. We used to think before that it was a luxury, but now having to be able to provide remote access and English language training and things like that, we had to leverage technology, and we provided iPads to all the families. All of this was as a result of engaging the community and finding support within the community for our work. So I'm going to, pivot back to talk about human rights. And I've tried to use the work of one organization, the International Institute of St. Louis, to demonstrate how many of our organizations are implementing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on a daily basis, and why it's important for us to embrace this, and love to see this on the walls of our local organizations, so people walk in there and people know that these rights inspire some of the policy changes that we have had in this country. In fact, in many countries around the world, especially post-1948 countries that were created, that got independence after the Second World War, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is an integral part of their constitutions. So if you take, for example, I come from Cameroon, and if you were to search the Constitution of Cameroon, you would see that after the preamble of the Constitution is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's an integral part of the Constitution, and it inspires everything else that follows the body of the Constitution. Now, for many countries that existed before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all they needed to do was adopt that, and hope that it inspires new laws that are created within those countries. But the key, and what advocates like us that believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is how do you take a declaration like that, that is seen as done at the United Nations, and make it mundane, make it common to everybody. So let me start by saying the United Nations is not government leaders. The United Nations is we, it's each one of us, it's we, the people. And there has been significant evolution in recent years at the United Nations, where the focus has really been bringing the voices of the people rather than the voices of the leaders. And one of the clear examples is something called the Sustainable Development Goals, where the Sustainable Development Goals, it's also inspired by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but there are just 17 goals that can help us attain the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in itself. And for the first time, the world came together and agreed on these goals without much debate, because we had the participation of the people. There were about 9 million young people took part in signing pledges demanding that the world take action on these 17 goals, and that made a difference. So too with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We, the people, have a voice. We as individuals, we as organizations, institutions, and corporations adopting this set of goals could affect change within the country and create more opportunities for people to grow. So I'm going to make a pause here, and I would just say for anyone who is interested in reading more about my book, you can look me up on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram, and you can find a copy of the book there. But I'll stop sharing so that we have enough time for a conversation around the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at this point.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ken Gunn. I'm helping out on the panel today. So if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A and we'll be happy to address it. And I want to get this started. Well, Arrey, let me ask you this. There's a lot going on in the country. A lot of our cities are dealing with gun violence. We see a rise of hate, white supremacy. Why should we worry about human rights?
So it all begins with human dignity. I think as I said, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the basis of that declaration is rooted in human dignity, that we're all born free and equal, and that we have certain rights, that we all have those equal rights. And so if we start thinking about that, if we start educating ourselves, if we start embracing those rights, the only thing that makes me think about another person as different from me, as foreign from me, is what I have learned over a period of time. So we're born into a family, and that family teaches us something about society. We step out of that family into our classrooms, and as we interact with people, we get notions about society. And so where we come from influences our outlook of society. And that's where we begin to draw the differences between white and black, brown and black. It's those differences that lead to the kind of challenges that we face as a society. But imagine if we were all educated, if we were all brought up to believe that every human being deserves the dignity that my son has, then we will not see other people as different or as a threat to us. It would lead to basic respect. And that's the only way that we can peacefully coexist, is if we begin to see every human being as deserving of the same dignity that we deserve. That is the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask another one. Just following up on that, a lot of us participating in this webinar work for human rights, human relations organizations. You know, we enforce ordinances. You know, we have all this power. How do we help move the needle on human rights issues?
Yeah, I think we talk about it. We start by being advocates of it. So I believe that we too often we see these declarations that are done as a piece of paper. But our role should be translating this from a document to how we live our lives. And how I always say that a good policy is not one that we memorize. A good policy is one that we live, right? If we can leave the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as how we operate our businesses, how we run our institutions, how we think about the people that we interact with, I think that is one way in which it can be done. I know that there is a movement now around the world which is called human rights cities. And the notion is trying to get cities to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the basis of which those cities are run. I know that movement continues to grow. It's been very extensive in Europe. It's growing here in the United States as well. But that's one way in which it can be done. And it has tremendous impact, especially on young people, because that's when the formative stages of our lives. If we can have our younger generation really embrace it, understand why the dignity of every human being is important, I think that we can develop a better society.
Thank you. Let me get to some of the questions that are coming in for you now. This first one is from Jackie Smith, and Jackie mentions, this week, the newly created Permanent Forum of People of African Descent is meeting in Geneva. Can you speak to how this new body can be used by human rights advocates to advance human rights and end systemic racism? If you have any knowledge of the membership and/or content of the meeting this week, can you share any news of how this new permanent forum is shaping up?
First, I'll start by saying, no, I do not have any information on membership and the content about this forum, but I happen to be African, and I know that the conversations that have led up to this. Africa is a continent of 1.2 billion people, and it's the fastest growing continent around the world. And if Africa were looked upon as one country, is going to be probably currently would be the third largest economic bloc in the world, the third largest market in the world. But Africa's strength has been has been greatly, on its path of history, has been greatly interrupted by the fact that we went through colonization that split the continent into 54 different countries and created barriers for economic development amongst the people. And in the process, also really disrupted the African culture. We're seeing now a movement around the world of having to return some of the artifacts that were put there with, I hate to use the word, but I'm going to say stolen out of Africa during the colonial days. And so there is this continuous conversation about how do we set up Africa to be representative of what is supposed to be around the world. And as we talk about human rights and human dignity, and I know that there is a tendency for us living in the West, when we talk about human rights, to think about this as in the context of Africa and not necessarily here. Yes, Africa has a long way to go with the respect of human rights, but so too does the rest of the world. And so too does the rest of the world in its interaction with Africa. I'll use a simple example of cocoa, right? Cocoa is produced, the most cocoa in the world is produced in Africa. But where does most of the chocolates come from? It's not from Africa. The chocolates that you and I buy are not from Africa. And the cost of purchase of a kilo of cocoa is less than the cost of what you buy for a payday bar of chocolate. So think about it, and think about the dignity of the people that work on those farms for generations. Are we giving them their due? So those are some of the conversations that are being had to figure out how the world adjusts its economy to respect the dignity of the African people.
All right, thank you. I just jumped in here, and I'm sorry, I'm so rude to our audience. I failed to introduce myself. I'm Ken Gunn. I'm the first Deputy Commissioner of the Chicago Commission on Human Relations and the Secretary to the Board for IAOHRA. And we have a couple more questions for you, Arrey. Let's start with Jean Kelleher. She asks, refugees are vetted extensively, but many states fail to embrace them, viewing all immigrants in the same negative way. Do you have suggestions for effective advocacy at the state level, focusing on human dignity with either the legislature or the executive branch?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Let me start by saying human beings are by nature immigrants, right? Human beings, just like every living creature, will always move from one place to another. Why do they move? If living things would always run away from adverse conditions. So if you start a fire in the forest, the animals will escape from the forest because of the fire. Human beings would equally do the same. They escape from adverse conditions. So when there is a conflict, people will escape from conflict because we're human beings. We fear danger. And it is that conflict that leads us to different parts of the world. We're here in the United States as well, as we talk about the United States. The original motto of the United States was out of many one. But people have come to this country from different parts of the world. So this is an immigrant nation. And over the years, as people have come to this country, we have seen adversity with every generation of immigrants that have come. And one would have thought that after 250 years of doing this, we would have understood by now that we are an immigrant country and we need to figure out how to deal with immigrants coming to the United States. There are three different ways that I would say how we can change this. one, we have to really look at the facts from the perspective of a moral obligation. Most of this country is Christian, most of this country is religious. There's a moral obligation that we have towards our fellow human beings that are in dire need of refuge. That's one aspect. And I know the question of immigration sometimes is seen as the border in the South. Mm-hmm. I hate to break the news to you all that 90% of the immigration in this country doesn't come through the southern border. It's a 10% problem that American immigration is focused on. 90% of the people who are immigrants in this country fly into this country. They come in through our airports. They come in legally, and then they overstay their visas. That's just something that we should have at the back of their mind. And people come here, people may come here with the intention of a visit. People may come here with the intention to study. People may come here, they're activists that come here for meetings, and then they find out that they are no longer welcomed in their country. So there's so many ways in which people come here to this country. And then whilst we can see on television and the headlines, but the majority of our immigrants in this country do not necessarily come in through the borders. Let me just say that in terms of advocacy, this country has been, so there's an economic imperative. This country has been built by immigrants. For every skyscraper that you see across this country, if you go down to Washington, D.C. and the capitals of most of our states, the people who built those buildings immigrated to America, were immigrants to America. The success of this country is built on the back of immigrants. And even as we speak today, this country is in dire need of immigration. 10 million positions will be unoccupied job positions for the next 5 years, unless we can do some magic to start having families of an average of 8 or 10. But even so, they're not going to grow fast enough to fill those positions. Immigrants, 1 in 5 small businesses in this country are started by immigrants. 65% of our Fortune 500 companies are started by immigrants or second generation immigrants. It is what America is. And so these people do not just, I know sometimes it makes headlines. There is the conversation that they're free loaders or they're taking jobs away from people and all of that. But America has always been built this way. It's people coming, people being involved, people helping this country go. And I think that we need to change the conversation. For those of us who understand it, we need to speak, we need to shout it from the mountaintop, because I think that we have left the conversation to the negative voices around immigration. But if we just think about the dignity of the women and children who are trying to find a living for themselves, they just want to find a place where they can bring up their own children. And I think if the tables were turned, we would leave America to go to Cameroon, to go to Africa, to find prosperity for ourselves. It's inherent in human nature. Our challenge as a country is to move away, from the challenge and focus on what the opportunities are. The politics of our country focuses on the challenges. But as the people, let's focus on the opportunities. There's so much value in embracing these various cultures that come to us than rejecting those cultures and creating barriers between people. At the end of the day, we must realize that people will come to America. We as a society have to figure out how we embrace them, and embracing them with the dignity that every human being deserves. I believe that we have to be strong advocates for what is right and not be carried away by the negative voices that focus on the few challenges instances of challenges.
I think that's where you have me. I think part of our issue, we look at human rights from a very narrow perspective. Those folks over there, their issues, their problem. Well, let's bring it home. What do you see as the human rights issues here in the United States?
Yeah. So I work here at the International Institute, and one of the things that I advocate for is that even as we try to create opportunities for the immigrants here, one thing that we must not ignore is the populations that are here and the populations that have been left behind. If I looked at Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says everyone has a right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services. It goes further to say, as we talk about gun violence, and the right to security, in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights addresses all of these things that we can imagine. I would say that this is a society, we live in the United States, we need to think, if we think about the dignity of every human being, we must realize that anyone that we leave behind has an impact on all of us. Too often I hear about people talking about crime in the inner cities and all of that, but crime is symptomatic of something. It's just a symptom. And rooted in crime is that respect for human dignity, and I'll explain this. I know that our educational system in this country, and I don't know why it is that way, is typically funded by property taxes, right? Now, if you have people moving out of the city, obviously you have the school system declining because of a decline in revenue, right? When you see that decline in revenue, we know that our educational system is the basis of our citizenship, right? So if people cannot get good quality education, what happens to those people? They can't get good quality jobs. So what happens to those people? Then you begin to find your way towards crime, right? But as a society, we need to rethink education, because education is a fundamental right. There is no reason why one person born in the west of the city would have better quality education than another person born in the east of the city. That is a fundamental flaw in our respect of human dignity. That is something that this country must think about. If we say all men are born equal, that is something that we must address as a people.
You keep raising these good points. See, you remind me, people here in Chicago, we think we got it all together. We got it all figured out. But it's the same thing with this country. Hey, we got it figured out. We know we can deal with these issues. But based on your travel to all the 100 plus countries, who gives us a good model of implementing human rights and supporting it?
Well, I think the Scandinavian countries have figured it out. Finland, Norway, Sweden, they have figured it out. In those countries, if you look at Finland, it is the best and brightest who are teachers in the classroom. And they're paid significant amount of money because they prepare the future of the country. That creates equal opportunities for everyone. When you give people the same level of education, which we know is what opens up us to opportunities in the workforce and entrepreneurship, you level the playing field for everyone. I think the Scandinavian countries have figured that everyone should have a universal income. So they have built safety nets in society because everyone, if we look at the rights, everyone is entitled to these rights. I keep trying to refer them. Everyone has the right to life, to liberty and security of happiness. It's enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. But if we leave segments of society behind, well, no wonder we run into problems, or we're always having this debate. But I think the Scandinavian countries have figured that out. Even the prison system, the prison system in those countries is not designed to punish. It's not an industry. It creates an opportunity for you to be rehabilitated. It's seen as a passage to reintegration into society rather than just being punitive. They don't have a punitive penitentiary system that eliminates people from society, but actually integrates people in the society. And sometimes you would visit the prison and think you're in a 4-star hotel. It's studios, apartments, and workforce programs where people are really taught to integrate society and overcome the challenges that they face that led them into criminal activity. I think that we really need to rethink that. And all of those, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I know sometimes in this country, we tend to think that some of these laws that are discussed at the United Nations and all of that are foreign to this country, but we're all part of the global society, and we need to figure out a way to live together and embrace some of these concepts that govern or drive progress in civilization.
Well, you heard it, President Warren. I think the next IAOHRA conference has to be in Finland. We've got to learn firsthand. Arrey, I'm gonna leave the last one for you. What are your parting thoughts for some? I mean, what would you like us to leave here with? What are your marching orders for us?
I would like to end with a quote by JFK, which says, "Too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought." Too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. It is the comfort of opinion that tells us that we cannot live in a society without poverty, that the housing challenges that we face would always be part of society, that not everybody is going to be able to earn a livable wage. But the discomfort of thought should tell us that we must do everything to ensure that everybody has the dignity that they deserve. Then we would have a society that's probably free of crime, a society where one race is not going to see itself as superior to the other. We have to think deeply about this, and then let's get to work.
Thank you for entertaining our questions. President Warren, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I think we could go on the rest of the afternoon. This has just been incredible, Arrey. Thank you so much for your insights. And I'm jotting all these notes down. We need to move away from the challenges and embrace our opportunities. And so, I'm definitely for one, I'm going to be getting your book. But the work you're doing around the world and here in our city of St. Louis, and I'm excited because I get to go and visit the International Institute anytime. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about the marching orders that you've listed out. And also, too, what you said that I think is important is that we need to translate the Declaration into more than just a piece of paper, right? It's not, and I have it hanging on the wall in our offices, so it is on the wall and in all of our offices, but we need to work it into real life. And we are doing it, and we may not even know it. There are many of those articles that we do in our day-to-day work all the time. So we are moving the needle as public servants every day. So, just to remember, too, that there are still so many people that are not enjoying the full range of human rights. We have a lot of work to do. We have so much work to do. And I think the good news is that there are a large number of people, just these over, close to 150 people on this webinar, that are really positioned to help move that needle and want to do more and want to work together towards a more civil society where everyone is equal, where we can establish the reality of the Declaration of Human Rights. So as we celebrate, we're celebrating International Human Rights Day. It's really this Saturday, right? But I gave everybody a break because we're a couple of days ahead of that. We really need to take pride in the fact that we are doing the work. We're moving the needle. So we need to continue to do that. I might have Angie throw up my slide because I want to make a shameless plug for IAOHRA's 2023 conference that will be coming up in August. And you are all invited to attend that conference. We're still a little tight-lipped on where it's going to be, but it is coming. Information is coming. So stay with us and check our website so that you know where it's going to be. You can mark your calendar, get us in your budget for August, and because we're going to have a lot more of this wonderful information to share with you, our colleagues, as we move forward. And I want to be sensitive to your time. But before I let everyone go, I have to go to our very last slide, which is to ask you to please do something for us. And that is to check your inbox, right? And you will have in your inbox a survey, a short survey. It will only just take you a few minutes. Fill that out and send that back in for us so we can stay connected with you and get you involved with our membership. If you're not already a member, we would love to have you participate. And just remember that the work that we do, as Arrey said, it's not easy and it doesn't change overnight. I mean, he's been moving the needle across the globe, and where many of us are doing what we can do to impact our municipalities, our cities, our counties, our states. And we need to do that and work to make those critical changes together, and know that you have an organization like IAOHRA that is here to help do that. So I want to wish you all a very happy International Human Rights Day, and to tell you thank you for all the work that you do every single day, and give you just a few minutes. You can do it while we're on the call. I think we're going to wrap up a few minutes early, but thank you for attending today. And we will leave out with a wonderful musical interlude while you're finishing your survey. So thank you very much for your time today, the privilege of your time. I know you could be anywhere else on your lunch hour today or during your day, and you were here with IAOHRA. So thank you very much for all you do, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your attention. And also to Arrey, incredible. I think we need a part two. We need to have a part two and invite you back. And Ken, I think Ken was our surprise question and Q&A guy for the day. You did a great job, Ken. Thank you so much. You get two attorneys on the screen, right, between Arrey and Ken, and I think we could do this all day, right? So thank you so much, Ken, and also thank you to the board of directors and the group of planning members, Diane Clements-Boyd and Angela Rush, who helped put this together, Lisa Sims, and also our board of directors, who is always supportive and wanting to make sure that we engage our membership, that this is value added, that it helps you in the work you do every single day. So stay tuned for more. We're going to be doing many of these programs throughout the year in 2023. So stay tuned. Check our website because you'll see more opportunities to engage with IAOHRA. Thank you so much and have a very wonderful day.